I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE, a global center of excellence for geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Learn how you can put geopolitics to work for your organization at ranenetwork.com.
Welcome to RANE's Essential Geopolitics podcast. I'm your host, Emily Donahue. Just reminding you that this podcast is really essential listening for business executives, academics, even those in the security industry and beyond. So buckle up and sit back. We're taking off, and today we're going to get into the recent transition of Western military aid to Ukraine. Tanks, missiles, a new kind of support. Much has been made of this change, but how much will actually change? Here with some guidance is RANE's Eurasia analyst, Matthew Orr. Welcome, Matthew.
Hey, Emily, it's great to be here.
It is always great to have you. Western leaders reached an agreement, as you know, of course, authorizing deliveries of modern Western battle tanks to Ukraine. Can you give me some details about the agreement specifics and why it was so difficult to get the West to finally ink that deal?
Yeah, I'll start with the first part. As far as what it entails, it basically involves several countries agreeing to provide main battle tanks to Ukraine. This has been in the works for a long time, several months really, but the biggest obstruction was essentially German domestic politics. And right, the major change that this would have undertaken for German defense kind of strategy and rhetoric, and it's really a historic change for them. Back in March and April, German officials had ruled this out. This was the kind of thing they said would have never happened, but now it's happening. The German chancellor attempted to put some limitations on this today in the German parliament. He told lawmakers that Germany would never send jets to Ukraine, modern aircraft. But considering the policy change on tanks, now it appears that previous limitation is also increasingly under question. As far as what the deal entails, we have the Germans agreeing to supply a group of their own modern tanks. This is the Leopard A6 variant. And then we have several other European countries. Many European countries use the Leopard, also already agreeing to provide the tanks. That includes Poland, also Finland, several other countries, including the Netherlands, Spain, and others are looking at how many they are going to supply. But a key piece of the deal was the U.S. also reportedly, and now confirmed, agreeing to supply its own Abrams tanks. Interestingly, the U.S. authority to do this is under the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which is actually a program established to support Ukraine's long-term defensive capabilities. In the past, what that's meant is not the supplies of U.S. Surplus stocks that can be quickly shipped from inventory in the United States, but actually earmarking future production of the most modern weapons for Ukraine. So in that context, it appears that this Abrams delivery is likely to be of specifically the more modern Abrams variants that are going to be particularly useful for the Ukrainians. So yeah, I mean, this is a pretty momentous decision that was a long time in the making.
Before I ask you how much of a difference these fighting vehicles will make for Ukraine, I want to ask you about the perception that this decision by the West isn't really upping a proxy war between the West and Russia.
Yeah, so first off, there's a whole academic debate about whether or not this is a proxy war. It's some people try to use that term because for certain reasons, right? It's taking place in a third country, and it's between the two countries that did engage in proxy wars during the Cold War era. But remember, this is fairly different because now we have a case where, right, one of the countries actually invaded another country and is annexing its territory. So that certainly kind of makes it of a pretty different nature. As far as the escalation risk, which I think the heart of your question is really getting at, I mean, it's clear that the Russian leadership is going to try to, right, it needs to dissuade any and all weapons deliveries to Ukraine from the West. That's what their strategy has been before the war started. It's what it's going to continue to be. But the Russians have actually continued to dig themselves a hole in this manner as they annex Ukrainian territory, allow what it claims to be Russia proper to be retaken, but then no significant escalation from Russia happens in response. So in that for that reason, I think that the Ukraine's Western supporters are rightly skeptical that Russia is going to escalate in a meaningful way. Is seriously considering expanding the war to their territory, to other countries. And the reason for that is that Russia has had multiple opportunities to do this in the past, and it hasn't done so because it probably wouldn't necessarily work out very well for them. So I'm skeptical that this is as escalatory of an action as maybe sometimes it's framed in the media.
So then let's talk about what kind of difference these tanks will make for Ukraine's battle.
Yeah, this is really the key question, and again, despite so much of the media attention is that this is getting, it's really unclear and pretty doubtful that this is going to have a truly significant. Often the word thrown around is game-changing battlefield impact. I think it's quite doubtful to have a truly game-changing battlefield impact. Some of the reasons for that are that these tanks are going to be supplied only months from now. The Ukrainians still have to get trained on them. Then they have to make it to the front. And then these tanks have to certainly be supplied in much larger quantities than only about the 100-ish or so that are currently slated for that quick delivery of 3 to 4 months. And even then, Russia can take relatively understandable tactical measures on the ground to deal with these tanks, right? Moving its anti-tank weaponry closer to the front lines in the areas where it expects a Ukrainian attack, specifically southward towards the Crimea land corridor. And so I'm quite skeptical that 100 or so tanks is going to necessarily ensure the effectiveness or success of Ukrainian offensives this summer. So I think it's really important not to kind of overstate the significance of this. What I think people should really be kind of laser focused on when they're looking at how successful Ukrainians can be in any offensives that they conduct this year, it's definitely how much ammunition for the longer range artillery and strike systems the Ukrainians are receiving, specifically the HIMARS ammunition, and most notably now the longer range ammunition for this system. Now there's talk that there's going to be these small diameter bombs, a longer range ammunition for these systems supplied that would allow the Ukrainians to start to strike Russian supply ammunition dumps farther behind the front line than they currently can, and that would have a more significant effect on actually creating the conditions where the Ukrainians are going to be capable of retaking that land bridge. Otherwise, right, we're going to be in a situation where the Russians know exactly where the Ukrainians want to attack, and they still have months and months to build fortifications and prepare for that attack. So that's why for all those reasons I'm quite skeptical that these tanks are as significant as the attention would suggest they are.
Now, you've mentioned this very clearly in our forecast that it doesn't look like either side will offer any concessions and the battle lines will become sort of dug in. My question to you is, would the supplying of these tanks be a slippery slope towards aircraft or some other item that actually could make a big difference?
Yeah, absolutely. As I kind of hinted at in my answers to the first two questions you asked, checking tanks off of the proverbial box, right? Checking that box, inevitably leads all kinds of policymakers and analysts and the whole community to ask, okay, well, what's next? What else can we do? and that's when we can get to these other systems that are more likely to make a difference, or for similar reasons to the tanks, right, are these kind of big ticket, kind of flashy items that will allow the West to say that they're supporting Ukraine, and in the long term, absolutely, Ukraine will need much more material to continue defending itself as this war appears likely to grind on and on. So yeah, I think that the conversation is inevitably going to shift to longer range strike systems. That's what the Ukrainians really need to retake their territory. But in the longer term, yeah, they're gonna need additional tanks beyond, right, this initial party that's been announced, and they're gonna need aircraft as well. They have their old Soviet aircraft, and I think that something to look out for is definitely if some of these MiG-29 jets that the Poles, the Slovaks had offered much earlier in the war, but those deliveries didn't go through. If eventually we see those jets, once we see Soviet jets supplied, it makes it more likely that Western jets could be supplied. Although I wouldn't get ahead of ourselves there. I think we're still certainly a long time from that, several months at least. But yeah, I think it's going to be about more technologically advanced aircraft. The U.S. can be a major player in this space because another weapon system that's been talked a lot about are more advanced drones for Ukraine, specifically U.S. Gray Eagle drones that reporting suggests the U.S. Army has kind of offered, said, hey, we can do these, or the Air Force has offered, but so far the Pentagon has kind of shot that down. But Ukraine definitely needs more drones and more aircraft to strike Russian forces on the ground in a close air support role to support its offensives.
Very quickly, does this change your forecast for what the war will look like in 2023?
No, this doesn't. This was definitely something we expected for a long time coming. The fact of the matter is that a lot of the old Soviet-era tank stocks were drying up, right? I mean, these systems were getting modernized. A lot of them were all being sent to Ukraine. The countries that wanted to send them sent them, and it didn't make much long-term sense to continue buying up this older Russian and Soviet equipment. So no, this was essentially something that was coming for a long time that doesn't change our outlook for this year.
Well, thank you so much for setting us straight, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Matthew Orr is RANE's Eurasia analyst. You can hear and see him on all manner of news media channels, but you can also get direct intel updates from Matt and the RANE analysts. Try RANE Intelligence Briefs. Our intelligence briefs separate the signal from the noise and turn information, of which there's often too much, into actionable intelligence. Visit ranenetwork.com to sign up. That's RANE network.com. I'm Emily Donahue. Thanks for listening.